To breaking news that the government has enforced Operation Sovereign Borders for the first time under the Labor administration. It was confirmed to me a few moments ago by the Acting Prime Minister Richard Marles. Here is that interview. Acting Prime Minister Richard Marles, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Kieran.
Congratulations. It's been a whirlwind few weeks, hasn't it?
It's been extraordinary. I said to a whole lot of people that we were very focused on election day, getting to 6 p.m. on that night, and I was struggling to get my head past that moment. And so it means everything that's really happened since has felt like a whirlwind. I mean, you imagine it, but it's to actually experience it is very different.
And then you're getting the briefings and whatever else, but you've also had to make a pretty big call early. I've seen this statement from Australian Border Force which says that the boat that was announced on Saturday from Sri Lanka has been turned back safely. That's happened under your watch already.
Yeah, so there's been a take-back procedure which has been enacted in relation to the people on board that vessel. Now that has involved a thorough screening of those people to assess whether there are any protection obligations from Australia in relation to any of them, and it's found that there is not. They have been returned to Sri Lanka, and that has happened in a very ordinary and routine way. I think it's important to say up front that what this shows is that there is absolutely no change in terms of Australia's border settings under this government. We will maintain a strong border, which is the right thing to do in terms of protecting lives at sea. It's actually the right thing to do in terms of empowering governments and empowering multilateral organisations like the UNHCR.
So Operation Sovereign Borders has been enforced under your direction already?
Completely. And it was always going to be. I mean, that was always our policy. It's been our position since 2015. It's the third election that we've taken it to, and it was very clear in my mind that this is exactly what we would do when faced with this situation, and we've done it. And people smugglers out there should know that very clearly. There will be no change under this government, and Australia retains its strong border stance. But I also want to say that the circumstances in which a media release was put out by the former government on Saturday...
On election day.
On election day. I mean, it was a disgrace. This should never have been in the public domain. The text that was sent out by the Liberal Party in that moment made our country less safe, made our borders less secure. That's what we need to understand.
So are you going to investigate how that all happened?
So we've asked the Secretary of the Department of Home Affairs to report to us on the circumstances of the issuing of the media release on election day. It was not routine. These are matters which should not have ended up in the public domain. And what's really clear is that the former Liberal government was far more interested in its own political interest than in the national interest. It sought to create division where there was none. Everyone knew that there was bipartisanship in relation to maintaining strong borders, and that is a national asset. But what that government did was seek to undermine that for its own political purposes.
Is this what the Prime Minister spoke about yesterday in this room, in fact, where he said that he won't politicise national security?
We're not going to politicise national security. What you can be sure under an Albanese Labor government is that we're going to act in the national interest. We're going to take it seriously. We're not going to use the national interest for political gain. Because at the end of the day, we're here to serve the Australian people, and it's about their interest where our actions matter, and that is at stark odds to what we've seen from the former government, who very plainly acted in their own political interest at every point. And I think what we saw on Saturday was a disgrace. And it was a real low point in the way in which the former government engaged in politicising national security.
How important was it for Anthony Albanese to go to the Quad? On his first full day in office, we've seen the images of him meeting with President Biden and the Indian and Japanese leaders. In your mind, why was that so crucial? Is it to say that there is continuity in terms of support?
It is certainly to say that in terms of our sense of the complexity of our strategic circumstances, of the importance of working with friends and allies in the region like the United States and Japan and India, that there was complete continuity. And again, there really has never been a division between the parties of government in relation to that. I think it was also really important for a statement to be made that we see action on climate change globally as being critically important, and that we want to be at the forefront of that.
So that's a big point of difference.
That is a point of difference. Australia's back at the table, and Anthony was very keen to be making that point. And I think finally it is a demonstration of how seriously we take our place in the world and how important we think it is that we make clear that in an Albanese Labor government, what you will have is a country which seeks to be responsible, sensible, thoughtful and purposeful in the way in which we engage with the world.
The former Prime Minister had a crack at you on a number of occasions, and other members of the coalition and various others criticising you for engaging with the Chinese embassy on a number of occasions. What do you say to that critique?
Well, it was a pathetic attempt to distract from their own failings. I mean, as tensions grew with China, the engagements that I had, and they were very few, once or twice a year, I made sure the former government was completely aware, and on occasions they were encouraging me to do it. So again, what we saw here was an attempt to politicise issues of national security, of strategic policy, to create difference where it didn't exist. And the reason for that was really to distract from the former government's failings, particularly in handling our relations within our own region, with Solomon Islands in the Pacific.
But when you say that they encouraged you, was it put to you that it was in the national interest, in their view, for you to keep up a dialogue, essentially?
Well, I mean, even we're talking about 1 or 2 meetings a year, and in a context where, you know, I maintain a relationship with a whole lot of members of the diplomatic corps here in Canberra. I mean, it's a fraction of the number of times I've met the United States Embassy, for example, or the British Embassy, or the New Zealand Embassy, or the French, you know. So I have maintained a relationship with the diplomatic corps. All I did was make sure that the government was aware, because I thought it was important, and that, you know, I might be able to assist in terms of them knowing what contact had been had. But I wouldn't want to overstate the amount of contact. It wasn't that much. But really, this was an attempt to latch onto that to try and distract from their failings in the region. And they have been profound and manifest. I mean, what we have seen with the security agreement which has now been reached between China and Solomon Islands is a country in the Pacific not seeing Australia as the natural partner of choice. Now, my experience in working with the countries of the Pacific, you know, we have such an advantage that if we do it right, if we play our cards right, if we make the effort, we are the natural partner of choice. But
Penny Wong, her first statement as Foreign Minister was a video message to the Pacific. Was that intentional, to try and get this back on an even keel?
100%. And to make it clear that the Pacific is a focus, and we're going to do the work. I mean, personal relationships obviously matter everywhere, but they really matter in the Pacific. And it's really important that people take the time to go out there and to meet the leaders of the Pacific, so that there is that engagement at a personal level. I mean, I've been gratified, in fact, that a number of leaders in the Pacific who I knew when I was doing that role have contacted me in the last few days since the election of a Labor government. But what's also clear is that the former government didn't have any relationships in the Pacific, none. And that's what's become patently clear in the fact that Solomon Islands have now moved in the direction that they have.
Okay, and finally, we're almost out of time, but why did you choose the employment portfolio? There was some speculation you'd want to go back to defence. Why employment?
When 15 months ago now, when at the beginning of 2021, I'm getting my time right, you know, Anthony and I both felt that it was really important that we had an agenda coming into the election, which we thought would be coming out of the pandemic, and that proved to be right, about how we build an economy for the country's future coming out of the pandemic. And there was a lot of challenges in respect of that. You know, we really do need to revitalise Australian industry. After 9 years of the coalition, Australia now ranks dead last in manufacturing capability. We need to climb the technological ladder and become a modern country. Again, after 9 years of the coalition government, on the Harvard Index of Economic Complexity, Australia now ranks 86th. We are ranked between Uzbekistan and Paraguay.
So you see it as a broad economic portfolio?
It is critically important that we are building a modern economy, that we aspire to be the most modern country in the world, where lies modernity, lies prosperity. And from a Labor point of view, lies the best distribution of income, because it's where there is the most secure, well-paid jobs. And it's really important that we move down that path. The National Reconstruction Fund speaks to that. Free TAFE speaks to that, giving people the skills that they need to get those really good jobs which are out there. That's actually how we get productivity going and how we get wages going.
Acting Prime Minister Richard Marles, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Kieran.